I'm very much afraid I have to kill you.
I want to build that guy. The combination of fighting up close, mixing it up with one of your summoned allies is really cool. I think that's a really awesome flavor that I'm going to try and nail with this build. Now you would think that we'd want to be a conjuration wizard, and there's reasons why we might want to, but the thing is that we want to get in there and mix it up with our summons, meaning we want to fight right alongside them, which means I'm going to have to be a Bladesinger. Now, if I'm going to be a Bladesinger, I'm going to want to take a race that's going to give me a martial weapon proficiency. The reason for that is so I can get proficiency in the hand crossbow. If I get proficiency in the hand crossbow, we can kind of do a ranged Bladesinger. It can either be a whole build or just an option that we have, which is going to be the latter for us, where we can now shoot the hand crossbow and then follow up with a firebolt or some other cantrip, because at level 6 we get the option to do a multi-attack mixed with a cantrip. So it just gives us an ranged option. I have a feeling that a lot of builds are going to lean towards taking Shadar-kai from here on out, because Shadar-kai is so very strong, and it is so very strong in this moment. The reason for that is that we still have a d6 of HP, even though we're going to have a crazy high AC with our Blade Song. By using a Shadar-kai, we actually increase our tankiness, because whenever we teleport, we now have resistance to all damage for the rest of that turn, which we can kind of use to make ourselves a bit of a tank. So now that we have the race, class, and subclass out of the way, let's jump into the actual meat and bones of the build. So we're not gonna get an actual summon until 5th level. So before then, we can kind of use our Find Familiar, Shadow Blade, just normal things that a Bladesinger would be doing. But once we hit level 5, we're going to start picking up our summon spells. And I really want this to be a Choose Your Pokémon type build, that you have a whole array of summons to choose from, and then you can pick the best ones for the moment. So we're gonna kind of do a bit of a deep dive into the summons that the wizard has offered here. Not a crazy deep dive, just going into them enough. So first up is Summon Fae. The Fae spirit that it summons is a highly mobile creature that can, as a bonus action, take a Fae step, which is basically Misty Step, and then depending on the type we chose, the Misty Step adds an extra effect. So super highly mobile, and then it uses a short sword attack, which is kind of interesting because it suggests that it uses human-based weapons. So what if we gave it a magic rapier? Would your DM allow it to use that magic rapier? Would it allow it to unsummon and resummon with it? Well, that's totally up to your DM, but because it comes with a short sword, there is an argument for that happening, and if your DM does allow that, you can actually kind of mold your Fae to be pretty cool and come up with some cool combinations. Moving into the 3 options we have, the first is Fuming. After you take the Misty Step bonus action, you can get advantage on your next attack, so it's basically just once per turn, you get advantage on an attack. Not bad. Not crazy. Now Mirthful, on the other hand, after it Misty Steps, it chooses one person within 10 feet of where it Misty Stepped to. They're going to have to make a wisdom save against your spell save DC, and if they fail it, they're charmed by both you and your summon. So that means that creature can no longer attack you or your summon, and you have advantage on your charisma checks against them, maybe to end the fight. So it's kind of a peaceful, and you don't even necessarily have to swing on it. You can just summon this creature and have it teleport around a room and try and charm people. So it kind of can be a social situation summon, which is pretty unique. But at the end of the day, we really don't mind our summons being attacked. Us not being attacked is nice. But our summons not being attacked, that just means they're going to attack our allies more likely than not, which isn't ideal. But if you do want a way to spread the charmed condition, this is a good way to do it. The next up is Trixie. So after it teleports, it can choose a square within 5 feet of it. So just kind of in its really close proximity, that square becomes a 5-foot cube of darkness. Now getting a lot of application out of this is pretty weird. You can kind of use it to give teammates a way to disengage for free. You can kind of use it in combination with blind sight. If you have a fighter with blind sight, to put it on the enemies so they can't see anything, then you can still hit them. There's ways to get use out of this, but it's kind of a combo piece. So you would have this in your back pocket if it synergizes with your team, but otherwise you wouldn't really use it. Next up, we have Summon Shadowspawn. Summon Shadowspawn is really powerful. It's more of a powerhouse summon than the Fae would be. The Fae is niche. This is very broad. When you summon this creature, it basically can use its action to do a fight-winning spell, just an AoE fear effect. So it's basically just a standard 3rd level fight-winning spell right off the gate, combined with the best health scaling out of all the summons. It scales really well with health, outscaling the dragon, outscaling the elementals. It just outscales them all and has really high HP, so it can act as a long-term tank. First of our forms is Fury, and Fury gives the summon advantage on an attack against anyone who's frightened. Now it creates frightened, but that's 1 turn out of an hour, so it's really not reliable. But if you have teammates who are spreading around the frightened, it combos really well with them and you can start scaling out damage really high. Then there's the Despair form, which any creature within 5 feet of it, if it starts its turn within 5 feet of the Despair form, just loses 20 feet of movement from their base movement speed. That's pretty crazy. That's going to slow them down a lot, and because the Shadowspawn has 40-foot movement speed, it's really going to be difficult to escape them. You're going to have a really high speed and be using your dash action to be able to escape if you're trying to run away. So this is a great way to stop someone from running. This is a great way to contain one person in the battlefield, maybe even multiple. Really good. Next up we have the Fear form, which is essentially an ambush predator. It can take the hide action as a bonus action. Now more often than not, we're going to want a tanky boy as our summon that's going to be trying to take hits, not avoid them. But if we ever need to summon an assassin, here's your guy. Next up is Summon Undead. First up is the Ghost, who can both fly and move through objects, and then on every single attack gives a save DC or they get feared. This is a great way to spread fear because the higher we upcast this creature, the more attacks it gets, the more fear it spreads. And the fact that it has a flying speed means that it can fit a melee flying niche that we don't otherwise have at this point. The skeletal form is basically a little warlock, summon mini warlock. It is basically has an Eldritch Blast and is a great combination for when you need to switch to your hand crossbow and use Firebolt. You can have the skeleton also be ranged damage and you guys can kind of just become a ranged damage platform together. Really great if you're facing flying enemies, for example. Next up is the Putrid form. Now, the Putrid form has an ability that just has an aura of the poison condition. If creatures around it fail a Constitution save, they spread poison. Now, Constitution saves are pretty hard to fail, but if we're facing a lot of smaller creatures, this is a great way to nerf a whole bunch of them really quickly. Now on top of that, when it attacks a poisoned creature, if they fail another Constitution save, they're paralyzed. Paralyzed is a crazy strong condition, but 2 Constitution saves in a row is a lot to ask for. And it is worth mentioning that the Putrid form, if you cast it at its smallest level, it doesn't scale that great. The aura doesn't get any better the more you scale it, so you're not going to spread poison any more efficiently. So using this at its base 3rd level spell makes a lot of sense. As we scale up, you'll probably want to save those higher spell slots for the Ghost, for example, where we can spread the frightened condition more efficiently. Once we get our 4th level spells, we start with Summon Aberration. Aberration gives us the Slod. The Slod it regenerates and it spreads the poison condition and is very tanky. So for these long-term fights, it's one of the best tanks you can have because it just keeps healing. The Beholderkin is essentially a flying skeleton. It's a flying mini warlock that just keeps shooting its psychic blast, kind of like an Eldritch Blast. So you just have a mini weapons platform. The Starspawn is a melee striker who has a damaging aura, so if you have a ton of low health enemies, this is a great way to cull those numbers quick. Next up is Summon Construct. Summon Construct is basically Summon Barbarian, which is really cool. You just summon this berserker creature. I think the one that really stands out to me is Clay. The Clay Golem, if it is hit, if it takes any damage, it can use its reaction to make an attack. Even if it's a fire breath, it doesn't even have to be a weapon attack. If it takes damage, it can attack anyone within 5 feet of it, and it's forced to attack anyone with 5 feet of it. So don't put it near your allies. But if it takes damage and there's no one near it, it can move half its movement speed as a reaction, so it can get up closer. Really good way just to put a chunk of hit points that just bulldozes enemies. The metal form basically has Armor of Agathis in a mini form. Every time it takes hit from a melee creature, it deals 1d10 fire damage back, which again is really good against just a swarm of little mini enemies, and especially if you can get them to attack it somehow. So if someone starts their turn within 10 feet of the stone form, it can use its reaction to try and basically do a mini slow spell on them. They won't be able to use their reactions and they will only be able to have half their movement speed. So kind of like the Shadowspawn that takes away movement speed, but this one works a little differently. The higher their movement speed, the more effective the Stone Golem is, whereas the lower their movement speed, the more effective the Shadowspawn is. Summon Elemental really gives us a tank in the form of the Earth Elemental, has resistance to piercing and slashing damage, which are really great resistances to have. And it does have a burrow speed, but you gotta be be careful because these creatures listen to your verbal commands, so if it gets buried too deep, it won't be able to hear you and will just sit there and dodge. Kind of need to be wary of that. But you do get a tank, and that's something we really want. Now, the water elemental is essentially the earth elemental in water. You want to use earth elemental on land and the water elemental in water, and now we have a summon that can breathe underwater, so we have an aquatic summon now. Choose your Pokemon, right? Along with that, we have the fire elemental. Fire elemental does fire damage, so if there's someone who's resistant to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing, then this is a good time to bring out the fire elemental. And the air elemental, of course, has a flying speed and an amorphous form. So the air elemental is good at hitting people who are in the air, go figure, but it also has the ability to dodge damage by hiding its amorphous form in objects. So it can hide in a crate or something like that. But again, we really don't want our elementals to be dodging damage, we want them to be tanking it for us. At 5th level, we get Summon Draconic Spirit. Summon Draconic Spirit is so versatile. On top of getting the normal amount of attacks, it also gets a breath weapon attack every turn. It comes with a huge package of resistances that it can share some of them with you. You can ride it because it's a large creature. You can now have a flying speed and be flying around on your dragon pal. There's nothing not cool about Summon Draconic Spirit. It's fantastic. And it also comes with the highest AC, tied only by the Guardian Summon Celestial as far as our summons go. So we get a really strong tanky boy. Less health than the Shadowspawn, but far more AC. And finally, capping out at our 6th level spell, we get Summon Fiend. So the interesting thing about these summons is when they're upcast to even levels, we can really compare them to each other. They all can be compared quite well. And I don't think Summon Fiend really stands up to the other summons cast at the same level. There are niches where they will stand out though. The Devil, for example, is a really high damage output ranged attacker, better than anyone else as far as damage output goes. Does do fire damage, which there are a lot of resistances out there that resist fire damage, so you gotta be careful of that. But if they're not, you can have a really efficient damage output. And it can also see through darkness, so if you're comboing darkness in any way, this is a creature that can work just fine in darkness. If you get put in darkness and you can't see, this is a good summon to throw out there. Yugoloth are extremely mobile tanks. They come with a lot more HP than the other fiends, and every time they make an attack, whether they hit or miss, they can teleport after, basically a Misty Step after every attack. They're gonna have a minimum of 3 attacks, so that's 3 Misty Steps a turn. That's a lot of mobility. This will be wherever you need it to be, so long as they're not flying. It does okay damage. The demon form does pretty dang good damage with a D12 as its roll, and when it dies, it basically explodes in a little mini fireball. Not doing a ton of damage, but it's just a way of damaging an AoE area, so if it gets swarmed by a bunch of little enemies, it punishes them back. So really, the demon form is your damage output, it's your striker, the Yugoloth is your high mobile tank, and the devil form is your ranged damage platform. So that's kind of our build here. We essentially summon whatever creature is perfect for the moment, whip out our sword or crossbow, and start getting to work fighting in combo with them. I really love the play style. Choose your Pokemon, think about which creature is needed in each situation, and just have fun. I think it's a really unique play style and just a fun build. What would you guys do with it? Let me know in the comments down below. Are there any combos I missed? Anything interesting you would add? I would love to hear it. If you're interested in some of our other flavor builds, check out this playlist here. And other than that, I just hope you have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll see you on the next one. Later.